Thank you, Will. Always a pleasure. Another marathon stint near its end, for today at least, on your part. Good to see you all. Late in the evening, as Will said here in the UK, but afternoon to everybody joining us from the other side of the Atlantic. It is always something to hear about the UFC media project and indeed the UFC in general, but it's been a particularly interesting year. And we're going to learn a bit about UFC Fight Island and other projects that have taken the organization through the pandemic, new partnerships with TikTok and more media outlets, and the developing strategy for the world's leading mixed martial arts promoter. We're going to be getting questions from you in the audience as well as we have been doing all day via the Swapcard platform. So please do keep those coming in. But I want to start by introducing Lawrence Epstein, the Chief Operating Officer of the UFC. Hi, Lawrence.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. Where are you? Where in the world are you joining us from today, Lawrence?
I'm actually joining you from Los Angeles, California. I've been here for a couple of days, heading back to Vegas. We've got a big event this weekend, UFC 259, so got to be back in town for that.
Sounds great. It's all go still at the UFC, despite everything that's been going on over the past year. But I wanted to start by asking how this year has changed the UFC as an organization. What you will have been doing things that you never expected to be doing, whether that's dialing in from a hotel room in California to a virtual industry conference, or whether that's hosting an event in a kind of sealed bio bubble in Abu Dhabi. But what's it done culturally to the UFC? How have you had to start thinking about yourselves?
Clearly this has been the most difficult year we've had in the history of the UFC, but in many ways it's been the most rewarding. I think it's reaffirmed, frankly, a lot of the strategies and the investments that we implemented prior to the pandemic. For example, the investment that we made in our Apex broadcast facility and our essentially our closed arena. That was something we were looking at, frankly, to do all different types of content and maybe some events. But of course, what happened with COVID, we were unable to produce events with fans and unable to produce them, outside of a controlled environment. So, that facility became just central to our content strategy, not just from the outset, but up currently to this day. As I mentioned, UFC 259, we got 3 title fights. It's an incredible show. It's going to be produced from this closed arena in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah, what was the baseline for you guys? Let's take it back a year to when you were thinking, can we get events off the ground? What were you considering to be the bedrocks that you could rely on to get you through this crisis?
Yeah, I mean, Dana White was really clear from the moment, we got kicked out of our offices and the whole world shut down. He challenged all of us to figure out a way to be the first back to the world of sports, but of course do that in a safe and secure manner. And so, from the moment we left the office, we began working remotely, with all of our teams to try to figure out how are we going to do this? How are we going to put the UFC events back on the sports landscape? How are we going to do it in a safe and efficient manner? And that resulted in us putting together this comprehensive health and safety plan that spanned 25 to 30 pages. Then we began working with regulators, both here in the United States and frankly around the world, and sort of got their feedback and refined the plan. And ultimately we put on a couple of events in Jacksonville, Florida, and then came back to Las Vegas. And of course, you mentioned after that series of events at Fight Island.
And let's take it back a step further. I mean, how far do you think of UFC as a promotional business, as a promoter, and how far do you think of it as a media business?
We've always thought of ourselves, even when we weren't a media business, as a media business. We never thought of ourselves in the context of just being, a promoter. It's so much of what we did in building the UFC brand and establishing our business was to take a look at boxing and sort of see what they'd done right, but even more importantly, what they hadn't done right. And one of the things that, in our view, they hadn't done right in the past was they focused on just being a promoter of individual events. It felt like every event wasn't connected. There was no brand associated with the boxing industry. And so we wanted to go in a different direction. And so we've always thought of ourselves as a media company, as a content creator, regardless of whatever platform we're on. We're creating content every single day, and that's what we do. Yes, the sport is mixed martial arts, and we are certainly promoting events, and we've got the greatest promoter in the world in Dana White. But we have always, frankly, thought of ourselves as a media content creation company.
So again, how has that affected the way that you've gone about things in the past 12 months?
Well, the first challenge that we had when we began, sort of, getting events back online was we had to create an environment that looked, as close as we possibly could to what those exciting live events looked like, prior to the COVID era beginning. We really looked at the Apex facility and tried to, through lighting and through a variety of things, tried to make it look as realistic and as connected to the authentic UFC product as we possibly could. Frankly, as other sports came online, we really analyzed what they were doing. We stole some ideas, in particular, from the NHL. We saw some things that they were doing on camera that we thought was good, and sort of gave that that experience that you're used to seeing when you watch live sporting events on TV. So we just continue to evolve. We continue to get better with respect to that content that we're delivering, and the results have been great. Whatever metric you look at for the UFC, whether you look at our pay-per-views, or you look at our ratings on TV, or social media, our content continues to perform well, and it's really grown since this whole COVID craziness began.
Let's talk about that production a little bit, and what have some of the lessons been that you've learned on that side of things from putting on these events in these compromised conditions? First of all, from a look and feel perspective, as you say, from the point of view of trying to get the event to be as engaging an on-screen product as you could make it without fans being in the arena. What was the biggest thing you learned?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, well, there's a lot of things we learned. I mean, one of the things we learned, and this is somewhat obvious, but I'll go ahead and say it, how important fans are to the actual product. There's so much airtime that is covered up with great wide shots showing the arena, or fans reacting to something that's happened in a UFC event. And so it really required us to really look at the events a little bit differently, because essentially we didn't have a part of our production anymore. And so, I think we got very creative in doing things that sort of filled that airtime, that made the event still, incredibly exciting. Another challenge that we had to confront was, athletic commissions and regulators told us, hey, you can only have, a certain number of people at these events, a number that was much lower than we were typically used to. So just to give you some perspective, we typically have about 350 people that are involved in the operation of our events. That would include third-party contractors. That would include people at the arenas. That would, of course, include our employees and our athletes and their corner people. We were challenged by regulators to cut that number well below 100. So we had to cut by almost 2/3, or more than 2/3, I should say, the number of people that were involved in the production of our events. That really focused us to rethink about how we were producing the events, and required us to produce them, frankly, in a much more, tight and efficient manner. It also got us thinking about, how people circulate between different, areas of the events, and of course we had to restrict that. So, there's some great learnings, frankly, that we developed, during this crazy time that we've been dealing with, that are going to live on, beyond the COVID era. And I think, we've really tightened up, frankly, from an operation standpoint, how we're producing, our events. And as I said, so many of the things we've learned will continue on once the world gets back to normal.
And where are you prioritizing that? Do you expect that that's going to be mainly on the operations side to begin with, or is it going to be how perhaps you've involved fans with events remotely? What are your thoughts on that at this point? Where obviously it's still a little bit speculative, because we don't know quite when we're going to be back up to full capacity as yet.
Yeah, I definitely feel, like, we're going to continue, as I mentioned, to, use the learnings that we had in this production and operation space, and we'll continue with those as time goes by. When it comes to fans, I mean, It's really tough because, we sort of feel like the live event is like the DNA of the UFC. I mean, everything that we do, tries to sprinkle a little bit of that DNA, from the live event, whether it's our video game, whether it's obviously the video content that we produce relating to our events, whether it's a consumer product, anything that we do, we sort of think, okay, how do we figure out a way to connect that back to that unbelievable high energy live experience that you have when you come to a UFC event. So, we are absolutely excited to return to the pre-COVID era and get people in the arenas enjoying our events because we feel that's such an important and impactful way to experience the UFC. But that being said, we understand the realities, and so we're going to continue to look at opportunities to engage with fans remotely. And I think even when we do return to the normal world, I still think those opportunities are going to be there.
Okay. I'm going to throw to the audience in just a couple of minutes to see if we've got any questions coming in from Swapcard. But first of all, let's move across a little bit to the distribution side of things. What's the balance right now for the UFC? You've got, you have pay-per-view events, you have major rights deals with the likes of ESPN, you've got your own content channels that are centrally owned, and you've got regional partners. What's the balance of your income between all of those activities on the broadcast side?
Yeah, I mean, to give you everybody a little perspective, I mean, it's a tremendous evolution with respect to the UFC over the years. I mean, we purchased this business back in 2001 and essentially had a handful of sort of broadcast traditional sort of TV deals around the world. And then, in the US, we were basically telecasting 7 or 8 events on pay-per-view platforms, very much like the boxing promoters had done for a long period of time. That sort of lasted for 4 or 5 years. We were then able to, via the success of the Ultimate Fighter, start putting some live fights on, broadly distributed platforms. Initially, Spike TV. That transitioned to Fox in the relationship we have with Fox, which was incredible. But we still, even up through the Fox deal, had the vast majority of our revenue coming from pay-per-view broadcasts. With this new deal we have with ESPN, we've really sort of, I think, in the United States created, just sort of a really balanced ecosystem that I think is sort of the best for the fans, and I think the best for the UFC, the sustainability of the UFC business. So we've got this broad reach platform with ESPN, which is, it's just an incredible partner to have. And when I say broad reach, I'm not just talking about broadcast. I'm talking about all the support that we get on digital platforms, earned media, all the stuff that we receive there. But focusing on the ESPN broadcast platform, I mean, it's really second to none when it comes to sports in the United States. We also have a relationship where we broadcast content and events on ABC. And of course, that's a free-to-air network. That's a great opportunity for us to engage with our fans, but also to attract new fans. We still have that pay-per-view platform in partnership with ESPN here in the United States, which is, of course, for those 12 or 13 major events per year. Mentioned the one we've got coming up this weekend. And then, ESPN Plus, which is, turning into this, incredible platform for so many different sports properties. But we've got a lot of content on that platform. And then, of course, finally, it's our Fight Pass OTT platform. This is a global OTT product, so it's available all over the world. The offering differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but this is for the super hardcore fan that really wants to have access to every single UFC event, all the shoulder programming, plus a ton of other mixed martial arts and martial arts content. And that's been just an incredibly successful product for us. So, the balance that we've got in the U.S. right now with, broad reach, great exposure, pay-per-view opportunities, plus OTT options like ESPN Plus and Fight Pass is really amazing. And then sprinkle on top of all that, all the stuff that we're doing on social and other digital platforms. It's a great situation for UFC fans right now because you can watch us, on so many different platforms whenever you want and however you want to watch it.
Yeah, so you've struck a nice balance there, as you said, between distribution and income, and you have all of those different deals, all those different partnerships doing different things for you. the big challenge for every rights holder, and while you do have your own in-house media outlets, that's primarily what you are, I guess, is that transition from the old pay TV rights model that sustained the sports industry for so long to something that capitalizes on the opportunity in digital, but it's an opportunity that hasn't yet started to mature in the same way. How much leeway do you have to manage that transition? What's the approach you've taken? Have there been any points where you said, okay, we're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of income here because the opportunity in 5 years, if we miss it, is too great?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes, and it reminds me of what we used to do back in the day when we were trying to expand the UFC brand. Many times we would take less money from a pay TV platform in order to get a broad reach on a free to air platform because we wanted to expose people to the UFC brand, and so we had to say, okay, we're thinking for the long term. Yes, we're going to take less money in the short term, but over the long term, we're going to expose more people to the UFC product. We're confident in our product. We believe they're going to like it. And ultimately, down the road, we'll have bigger monetization opportunities if we grow the fan base. The mindset's a bit the same right now. I mean, you have to take a bit of a leap of faith when it comes to distributing your content on what I would call sort of the non-traditional broadcast platforms. But you have to have the mindset that this is the way that people, at least a good segment of the population, are going to want to consume your content. You have to believe that it's also like the free to air was, a decade ago, this big opportunity for us to attract new fans. And listen, anybody who's got kids, I've come back. Sorry about that. Anybody who's
No
got kids,
problem.
as I was saying, or engages. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, can hear you now.
Oh, great. So as I was saying, anybody who's got kids like I do, or anybody who engages with younger people, will know the way they consume content is completely different the way, certainly the way I did. And they don't watch TV like older people like me do. So you've got to make sure that you've got content on the platforms and distribute it in a way that will engage with that younger fan. And so, yes, we're taking a bit of a leap of faith. There's no doubt about that, but we certainly believe in the long term this is going to be the right play. And listen, different markets are in different stages of development. We just did a groundbreaking deal with Migu in China, and that deal is so much different than anything else that we've done globally with our UFC content. And I think it's going to be somewhat of a model for us in many jurisdictions around the world. And that deal involves, yes, broadcasting, of course, our UFC events, but also involves training videos and a whole bunch of other things that will be specifically purposed for that particular market and for distribution on social channels that will engage people with the UFC brand.
Okay, a couple of things that we will come back to there. I think one, you talked a lot about engaging younger viewers, and I do want to talk about your partnership with TikTok at some point, and also your new partnership in China. We are going to go to the audience in a second, but before we do, I mean, with all of that, does the fact that you controlled so much of the production, so much of there was so much more ownership taken in terms of how you produced all of that content and created it from the outset. Has that helped you with the mindset that's needed right now?
It absolutely has. And, it's funny, sometimes you make good decisions and you're able to reap those benefits. Sometimes you have no choices at all and you sort of got to do what you got to do. And ultimately that results in great opportunities. And, early on, we bought the UFC in 2001. No one was interested in broadcasting our content. So we couldn't get a broadcast partner to actually do production. So we had to do it ourselves. And, that wasn't by choice, frankly. If we could have gotten a deal back in the day with an ESPN that would have produced the content, I'm sure we would have done it. But we didn't have that opportunity, so we had to do it ourselves. But over the years, we resulted what the result of that was us developing a core competency in producing content. Number two, early on we figured out, wait a second, we think this sport has some legs internationally, and we began to see that people around the world enjoyed mixed martial arts. There were athletes from around the world, and as we went to do content deals around the world. One of the things that we didn't want to do was to have our content seem like it was sort of warmed over U.S. content, for another for a different market. So, for example, spend a lot of time down in Brazil. I watch the NFL down in Brazil. I mean, at times you'll see, American broadcasters' logos on that content. It doesn't look like it's produced for the Brazilian market. And so, we decided early on that we wanted to make sure that our content, even if the event was taking place in Las Vegas, that the content looked like it was produced for the Brazilian or the Chinese or whatever market we were selling that content in. In order to do that, you have to maintain a level of control over your content. You can't have people with, mic sleeves that say, XYZ network on them that then you broadcast, to other countries around the world. You've got to make sure that the aesthetic of your content is consistent with, sort of an international feed. And so, we ended up doing all that stuff. And so, your question is a great one, and the answer is absolutely yes. The fact that we have so much control over our content makes the opportunities to do these type of deals, so much easier. I frankly, I don't know how we could have done them if we didn't have the control that we have.
Okay. First question from the audience takes us in a slightly different direction, but I think one that I was really keen to explore at some stage. Richard Fitzgerald asks, do you see betting and merchandising revenues delivering real value to UFC? You can take that part first, and then I've got a bit of my own to add, which is how much integration are we going to see of that kind of thing into the UFC's broadcasts, whether they're the ones that you own or the ones that you're selling into broadcast partners?
Yeah. So just to answer that question quickly, I mean, you already see a fair amount of Yeah, we see a fair amount of integration already with betting odds, and of course, our partnership with betting, operators around the world. So you're already seeing that. I think you're going to see more. We're working, really, really hard on creating, automated data feeds, and we're not there just yet, but we're going to get there in relatively short order. And so when that happens, I think you're going to see more of that, sort of infusing itself into our content. But going back to the first question, you're going to see more and more connection between the UFC and betting partners around the world. The monetization of those relationships is just one, frankly, piece of the puzzle. It's probably the least exciting piece of the puzzle from my standpoint, because I am actually more excited about what partnering with gambling operators around the world can do to engage our existing fan base, to get them to consume more UFC content, but also to expose and bring new fans into the UFC ecosystem. We've seen it time and time again about how gambling increases people's interest in sports in general, and we've seen it specifically with respect to the UFC. So you're going to see more and more of that, in particular as we see more and more legalization of sports gaming in the United States. I could be off, but I think we're at 12 states right now, and we've got maybe more than that are now already considering legislation that would allow it. So you're going to see a massive proliferation of sports gaming in the United States, and we feel that is great for all sports. Specifically, it's great for the UFC because, as I said, it's going to increase engagement with our existing fan base, but it's also going to bring new fans to the UFC.
Mm. I mean, we heard a bit earlier from NBC about the specific challenge in the US of the fact that, as you said, these things are rolling out state by state, and that means that non-betting gaming or kind of free betting services, free betting products are going to see some play in American broadcasts. Do you see yourself having that kind of overlap between something that's just a type of interactivity and engagement, and that can be converted to a betting product at a later date?
Yeah, I think the answer is absolutely yes. But I mean, to go back to sort of the first statement that was made, I agree with whoever spoke from NBC that, it is a difficult landscape with things going state by state. But, COVID has accelerated the legalization of gaming throughout the United States. I think in just a few years, you're going to have close to 50 states that will have, some form of sports gaming. And that may differ a bit, but I think the landscape is going to change dramatically over the next few years. So, the good news is that, the current, landscape, I think, is going to change, and it's going to be great for NBC. It's going to be great for all broadcasters, and it's certainly going to be great for sports properties like the UFC.
Okay, continuing on that theme, we have a question from Alexander Azanov who asks, do you see that in the future UFC broadcasters will approach computer games, for example, UFC broadcasts, excuse me, will approach computer games. For example, UFC broadcasts will approach the computer game UFC 4, where you can see various analytical data of the fighter in real time. How much more integration with data and different kinds of storytelling are we going to see within live broadcasts, Lawrence?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned, this project that we've been working on to really create, automated data feeds from our events. That's going to have significant applicability in the gaming space because it's going to create, I think, a really dynamic market for in-round betting. Right now, you can bet sort of at the beginning of the event, who's going to win, what round they're going to win. Some bookmakers are offering, sort of in between round type betting, but there's not a lot of sort of this in round betting because there really isn't this robust automated data feed that people can bet on. So I see a lot more of that in the gaming space, and I think that's going to happen. And I know it's a major project that we're working on. It's going to infuse itself into our content in general. It's just gonna, as people, become more interested in gambling, there's more information, whether you're gambling or you're not, there's going to be, all these opportunities to infuse all of this data that will be generated very soon, hopefully automatically, into the content themselves. And then, I don't know if this was actually part of the question, but then there's this sort of crossover to the virtual world, which, it seems like the real world and the virtual world are converging and getting closer to each other every day. But, we feel that there's a huge opportunity for virtual gaming opportunities with our UFC video game in partnership with EA Sports, and EA is working on several technology platforms and strategies that are going to help us create, I think, a really dynamic environment in the virtual space too. So this is an area that we're focusing a lot of energy and a lot of time on because we feel like it's just such an important fan engagement and an opportunity to attract new people to the UFC.
Is there a process by which we're going to see some of these smaller, well, not smaller, but each part is smaller, whether that's betting, whether that's in-event purchases or microtransactions, perhaps, which we've heard other rights holders talk about. Are they going to replace the wholesale of media rights as a major income stream for you, or is it going to be an additional one? What's the strategic play here?
Yeah, I think it's going to be incremental additional revenue. I I think the traditional broadcast you see with ESPN. I mean, they're not thinking about content the way they did 5 years ago. As how do we put it on ESPN one or ESPN two or ESPNU or one of their platforms? They're thinking about this stuff in a completely different way. And I'm not just talking about their OTT platforms or selling pay-per-view, but the way they distribute content on social, the way they engage fans in all that is part of the ESPN brand and ecosystem. So I think that just like the virtual world and the real world are coming together, these the digital world and the traditional broadcast world, they're all coming together too. And one really doesn't work in isolation from the other. If you get these different verticals sort of working together, you get this sort of 1 + 1 + 1 = 5 or 6 or 10 situation, and that's I think what you're going to see. So we see this as incremental, but we also see there's synergistic opportunities to help us grow our brand.
Sure. Okay, let's talk about your content operation in a slightly different place and a slightly different direction. You've recently expanded your partnership with TikTok, which is going to involve some live streaming of kind of behind the scenes events for the UFC. It's also, I understand, going to involve you dedicating a part of your headquarters for content creation. What else can you tell us about that, and what kind of a role do you think that's going to play in your broader broadcast setup? or your broader media and
You
content
know,
setup, I should say?
yeah, so we talked about young fans earlier, and I mean, this is just such an important platform to engage and expose young fans to the UFC product. You laid it out well. This is a content deal that we are entering into with TikTok. It's going to create, a bunch of interesting behind the scenes stuff. It's clearly going to be done in the TikTok way, but we see it as, just an incredibly important part of this UFC sort of distribution strategy. And I'll go back to my kids again. And anybody who hangs out with young people, you see how much not only they engage with TikTok, but how much they discover on TikTok. I mean, it's music, it's fashion, it's dances, it's so many different things that they aren't going to the platform to necessarily discover those things, but they do discover them there. And we're really proud of the growth that we've had on TikTok. It's been very, very dramatic. We think our content is really well suited for that platform too. So this is a really, really important partnership, and we're constantly thinking about how this partnership can work synergistically with the other content partnerships that we've got, not just in the United States but around the world.
What's worked on that platform? You said you've had some success there. What do you find is connecting with users on TikTok?
Clearly, fighter related content is working, well. That's probably been the most successful thing that we've been doing on TikTok. But a lot of other stuff has done very well too. Some of the stuff that Dana White's done, and as I said, it feels like we are growing because I think we're producing high quality stuff, but also because the platform is just conducive to discovery. And we're confident in the product. We think our product's great. It's exciting. It's fun. And once people get exposed to it, they typically want more.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the power of individuals there and the role of individuals within your within what you're putting out there, and particularly the kind of network effect that they have on things like TikTok. How has that changed? Do you think in the last 10 years or so, where we've seen social be so influential in terms of driving media interest and driving awareness and that type of thing? Because UFC famously was about the centrality of the brand, right? Once upon a time. But of course, what drives interest in sports events is athletes and competition. So how has that balance changed, and how do you see that developing over the next few years?
Yeah, I don't think the balance has really changed. I mean, our strategy was, and I mentioned boxing, been around for a long time. They really hadn't established a brand. Certainly some great stars were created over the years, but what our thought was is, create a brand, add that brand to individual fighters, and you have this, explosive marketing opportunity. The synergies between the brand and the individual athletes will create a situation where you can create bigger stars than you ever could, without a brand. And I mean, I give you a lot of examples. I mean, I think Conor McGregor is probably the best. The exposure that we gave him within the UFC ecosystem and around the UFC brand has turned him into, one of the most notable stars in the world of sport. And so, that's part of what we do. I mean, one of the things that we do, we're talking a lot about the success of what the UFC's done on social media, but one of the things that we do for athletes is help them grow their own social media following. And of course, Connor has done that, in incredible ways. Last time I checked, it was over 55 million people following him on social. And he does a great job because he creates really fun, interesting content that sort of bridges the gap in between his fights too. I mean, it's just amazing how, I follow him on social and how interesting the stuff that he posts, whether it's training, whether it's fashion, whether it's, whatever the stuff that he does. He's an engaging character, not just when he's fighting, but frankly, he's just as engaging in between those fights. And so, that dynamic is really important for athletes. It's important for us. And of course, if we're doing our job, we're obviously growing the sport of mixed martial arts and the UFC brand, but we're also helping our athletes grow their brands, which is good for everybody. So I don't think the dynamics really change. I think we've just frankly had some bigger success stories with Ronda Rousey's and Conor McGregor's and Israel Adesanya's and John Jones and so many athletes that have just exploded on social media.
Yeah. Okay. I think we managed to get to almost 5 minutes from the end there before we mentioned Conor McGregor, but he works his way into the conversation eventually. We've got a little bit more to come from the audience. Ryan Henderson, kind of a related question, but certainly I think really interesting in terms of the dynamics of fight sports at the moment. But he asks, what is your take on the celebrity fight club events that seem to be popping up more and more between popular YouTubers, for example? Do you see these MMA matchups as a disruptor to UFC programming, as a gateway to your content, as a programming addition down the line, or something else? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, I'm cheering for everybody to do well. I mean, clearly these spectacle type events are really not for us. But I do think that people that are exposed to Jake Paul, fighting one of our former athletes, or Logan Paul, I always get them confused. One of the Paul brothers. Like Ben Askren, I think there are opportunities for us to engage with someone who's interested in watching Ben Askren fight, fight Logan or Jake, whatever one it is. I get confused. But so I do think it's a gateway and a potential opportunity to engage new fans. But it's not something necessarily that we're super interested in. We spent a lot of time and effort trying to legitimize the sport of mixed martial arts, try to explain to people what it's all about and frankly what it's not about. And we're very proud of our safety record. We're proud of the work that we do to make sure our matches are fair and that we've done thousands and thousands of events. We've never had a serious injury, and part of that is because of the work that we do, the regulatory environment that supervises our events. So it's not something that at least we're looking at doing anytime soon or ever. But that doesn't mean we're not rooting for those guys to do well. And I do think it's a good question. I do think that it has potential sort of gateway opportunities. If they like what they see, they're probably going to want to check out the real thing, which is of course and the market leader, which of course is the UFC.
What is it? What do you make of the changes that it's having, or sorry, the effect that it's having on the media landscape? You've got companies like Triller coming in and kind of putting up these almost pop up boxing promotions. Do you keep an eye on that for where your audience might be, or what opportunities might exist for you in the future?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do as a company is we do a lot of research and we do a lot of surveys and we have tons of focus groups that we talk to about a variety of things. In fact, we do a focus group before every single event to try to engage hardcore fans, casual fans, all different fan segments, interest in a particular event. And I think these type of events appeal to a certain demographic, and there's no doubt there is some crossover with UFC events and these type of events. So we're always looking, we're always trying to learn from what other people are doing, and whether it's the Mike Tyson exhibition that was fairly successful, whether it's these events that are coming up with Ben Askren and Paul. We're always looking to try to figure out how we can get more people into the UFC ecosystem, and there's definitely stuff to be learned from these events.
Okay, and maybe one day we will learn which one is Jake and which one is Logan Paul.
Exactly.
I think we're about to wrap up here, so I'm afraid I won't be able to take any more questions from the audience. But I did just want to finish by asking what your priorities are going to be now, building back through 2021 to a post-COVID future. How are you going to manage the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's so many priorities. I mean, clearly, we want to get back to the way things were before, with full arenas and people enjoying the UFC, fan experience in person. We also want to make sure that we're able to do events all over the world. I mean, we're a global media company. We produce content that is distributed in 160 countries and territories around the world, and part of the strategy for exposing the brand and enhancing the content was to make sure that we were doing events, in Brazil, throughout Europe, throughout Asia, and of course here in the United States, throughout the United States and Canada. And so, that's really important to us. In the Middle East, of course, Fight Island. That's really important to us to make sure that we are exposing the live product to, the entire planet. And those are going to absolutely be the priorities, that we're going to pursue as the world hopefully gets back to normal sooner rather than later.
Let's certainly hope so. Lawrence, thanks very much for your time. Thanks to all of you for watching. Sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions, or indeed all of mine. There's so much to talk about when it comes to the UFC and its media project. But we are going to leave it there for this session. We're not quite done with the event yet today, or of course, overall, but I'm going to hand you back to Will Tubbs, your host here in this room.
Thank you, Owen. And of course, thank you, Lawrence, over in Los Angeles, and to everyone else who have joined us today across the globe at the OTT Sports Pro USA Summit. And what an amazing day it's been. I hope you enjoyed it and managed to take away some real key learnings here. I especially enjoyed the Evolving Fan panel earlier with Bohan at Buzzer, TJ at Twitter, Sam Farber at the NBA, where we learned kind of unique strategies into ways to entice Gen Z to watch live sports content. It was also great to see the Bo TJ bromance blossom even further. So you can watch that all again, as I mentioned earlier, on demand. Just click on the session earlier from the agenda. We have more juicy content heading your way tomorrow, starting at the same time, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or 2 p.m. GMT, which includes a State of the Union session with the PGA Tour's Chief Media Officer and ESPN's Executive Vice President for Original Programming, who will assess where the OTT and broadcast industry will be in 5 years and more. And there's a unique case study looking into how DraftKings and Turner have connected fans through gamification. Really excited by that one. Plus loads more sessions going on. So you can check Swapcard and just click on the agenda tab to see what's happening there. Let's go to day 2. Remember, you can head to the social stand-up taking place now, which you can gain access through Swapcard. It's 8 p.m. here in London, so I'll be definitely heading there with a beer. Everyone else in the States, please do the same if you wish. Thank you once again, and see you tomorrow.